the computers are gonna die to like the world's gonna end. Like
We
nobody
were
knew what would happen.
we were
Yeah.
sleeping in cots at the Navy base because we didn't know what was going to happen. So I had drawn this on the whiteboard saying, tomorrow morning when we wake up, I'm quitting IT and becoming an earthworm dirt farmer.
That's amazing.
Welcome to Cocktails and Socktails. Blink.
Blink.
The podcast where we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals. I'm Megan.
And I'm Carly, and on today's show, we're talking about starting from the ground up with Frankie Gross, aka Cyber Sensei, hearing stories from throughout his 20-plus year career. Frankie is currently a principal security technical specialist at Microsoft Federal. He'll say something that Megan and I resonate with in regards to how all of our paths got here, dumb luck, but his career blooms from a passion for computers and personal drive to learn more. Without giving away too many great moments and nuggets, let's get into it. Welcome, Frankie. What are you drinking?
Thank you. I'm drinking a Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA.
Ew, IPA.
Yeah.
Is it super hoppy? I don't like the super hoppy ones.
It's super hoppy and super high in alcohol. So depending on how this podcast goes, we might need
It's gonna
to
go well, it sounds like.
Sounds like we're going to get some good deeds.
Yeah.
Megan, what are you drinking?
G&T. G&T.
Oh, see, you girls roll hard. I should have went and grabbed my whiskey.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like we gave you fair warning on that.
That's
Okay.
true.
Carly?
I jumped on the gin. I jumped on the gin train today, but
The gin
classically, it is called a white linen. So it is gin and Saint Germain, cucumber and lemon.
I was gonna say there's a lot of produce in your drink. Like,
Yeah.
It's just a few slices of cucumber.
How
I
else is she
prefer
gonna
my
get her
produce
vegetable?
fermented.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that
It's
meme
called
that's
pickling.
like, I had a fruit salad for dinner. Okay, it was grapes. Okay, fine, it was grape juice. All right, it was fermented grape juice. Fine, I had wine for dinner.
I think I have seen that. That
I
is
had it for breakfast,
perfect.
but you can't drink all day in the morning.
You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning. That's right.
That is true. So Frankie, all right, we've already called you Cyber Sensei, 20 plus years. Try and give us, a snapshot of what that career looks like.
Wow, that's like
A snapshot.
yeah. You can't just
Let's go through it. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the
Sorry.
ground up.
From the
We're going from
beginning,
the
but
ground
put it
up.
in a snap.
Yeah,
From the
so-
ground up. Yeah.
So I like that, right? So I got interested in computers actually, not through working on computers. I so I went to school for electronics, right? And I was going for an electronics engineering degree, and basically when the recruiter come for the college, he's like, well, how much money do you want to make when you get out of college? And I was like, well, I want to start at like $50,000 a year. And the guy started laughing at me, right? He's like, you're not going to make $50,000 a year right out of school. And I was like, why not? Why am I paying you all this money to go to school if I'm not going to?
Right.
You want to tell us what year that was for context?
That was 1992.
Okay, that's not bad.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, 1992. So, or no, I'm sorry, 1990.
Okay.
1992 is when I kind of graduated, but with an associate's degree. In any case, so I went, and I did that, and then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I'll never forget this. My mom, she's like, well, what are you interested in? And ever since I was a little kid, I would tear things apart. I would break my toys, and I would try to figure out how they work, and then I would try to fix them. And 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't be able to fix it because I didn't know how it all worked. But I tried, and then I actually started getting really good at doing stuff like that, and I could fix stuff. But I kind of had, I guess, an engineering kind of mind, right? Like I wanted to understand how it works. So that's why I went to school for electronics. But my mom, she's like, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I was like, I don't know. I just want to make good money. I want to get a good job and do that. And, she goes, well, why don't you get into computers? Look at that young Billy Gates. He's a millionaire.
Wow.
Just
Look
do
at
that,
that.
Frankie.
How fortuitous, Mom.
Yeah, how fortuitous, Mom. But it was kind of funny because she said that, and it kind of always stuck with me, even though I was going through school, and there was a couple of courses in there that were programming and computer, but it was only like one semester or what have you. But while I was going to school, I worked with this guy that helped me. I used to help him his side business. I was part-time there. I would go there after college, and then I would basically install Windows on these workstations that he had in our store. It was a locksmith store, and we sold trophies and stuff like that, and did locksmithing stuff. And so I would sit there all day while I was there, and I would feed this thing, because back then, installing Windows 3.1 was like 31 disks, I think, floppy disks. You guys don't even know what those are. I probably should have grabbed one out of a box and showed
The
you.
8-inch one?
Yeah, you had the 5-inch ones, and then
Oh, the 5-inch one.
and then they upgraded to the 3.5-inch ones, which yeah. So
I've seen
you'd
those.
sit
I've
there
seen
and
the big ones.
yeah, you'd have to feed it like 30 of these things, and it took like a couple of hours to build a machine. So he would get me to do that, and then he gave me this 5-disc program on Learn MS-DOS, right? And all it was to teach you the MS-DOS commands, which was the disk operating system. That was like the first operating system. So I would sit there and I would go through that on one of the other computers while I was sitting there in the store waiting for customers to come in and play around with it. And so I just got into it, and I learned, he taught me a little bit of stuff, on working on that. And then one of the guys I grew up with, we ended up getting a job at this satellite communications company, and from there, we're working there. And then the guy that worked there, because I knew a little bit about computers, he would like, hey, go install these modems and then go upgrade this computer. And I remember going into the owner of the company saying, hey, I need to go buy some new hard drives. And he's like, oh, well, what do you want to get? And I was like, I want to get these, I want to upgrade these to like 80 meg hard drives, right? Like this, that was the hard drive, was 80 meg.
80 megs.
Yeah. So we're going to upgrade them because, we need higher, system requirements, because this new operating system's coming out. It's like Windows 95, right? It's like way back when, right? Like, want to get this new operating system loaded. And so he's like, why would anybody need that much memory, right? Like,
Now
And
that's
now
like
we're in a
one
day
photo
and
on
age
your
where
phone.
it's like
yeah, like now today,
terabytes and
that's like,
petabytes and
yeah, now you got more computing power in your phone than you had when they landed someone on the moon, right? Like that whole system, you got more computing power in your phone. But the the key here is that so my buddy, I got him a job there, right? And he was an installer, and I because I went to school for electronics, I was doing the electronics stuff. He also so I went to ITT Technical Institute. He went to ECPI, right? Like, two rival kind of technical schools. But, so I got him a job, and then his parents, they were retired military. They also were civil servants that worked out at the Navy base, Norfolk Navy base. And, finally he came to me one day and he's like, hey man, I'm leaving. And I'm like, what, where are you going? He's like, I got this job working on the Navy base. He's like, they're going to get me a security clearance. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And he's like, I'm going to make a lot more money than I'm making here. He goes, I think you should apply. Right. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm doing what I went to school for. I was building circuit boards, right? We built these systems that tracked inclined orbit satellites, right, all over the world. And like we built the first one, and then I was building it at the component level, like the circuit boards, putting all that stuff in there. And I was like, I don't know, I'll go interview, I'll see what the offer is. So I went and I interviewed, and I'll never forget. He was telling me, he says, hey, they'll pay to send you to school. And he's like, there's people that have these CNA certifications, certified Novell administrators. He's like, they make 6 figures, dude. Like, you need to go do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go. I'll go. So I interview with the guy, and the guy looks at my resume, and he's like, are you really sure you want this job? Do you understand what this job is? Because you're gonna be like crawling around in basements pulling cable and stuff, right? Like, and it was completely different from what I was doing. And I asked the guy, I was like, well, are you going to pay to send me to school? And I said, well, I heard that you guys have certified Novell administrators. Will you pay to do that? And he's like, oh yeah, we got an education program. He's like, as long as it's related to work, we'll reimburse you for it as long as you pass the classes. I was like, all right, I'm in. So I get the job, and we're running around pulling cable for what they were fiber optic cable for ATM networks. And I'll never forget asking myself, like, why do they need so many ATM machines on the Navy base? Right? Like I didn't know what was going on there. It's like
I know what's going on.
I was like, why do they
You
need
ever
so
been on Navy base? Anyway, sorry.
and then I finally learned that it wasn't an ATM cash machine. It was asynchronous transfer mode. It was the latest and greatest.
That would be a me move. What?
It was the latest and greatest, fastest network that was available at the time, for computer systems, and they were upgrading, and that's why we were pulling, so much fiber crawling around in these basements of these buildings that, thick concrete walls that could withstand nuclear blasts. And anyway, we do that. Well, then because we finally get to our destination of installing all this rigid 4-inch steel pipes and pulling cables through it into these rooms where they had these switches where all the cables plugged into, and I'm like, oh, well, what's that, right? And they're like, oh, that's the ATM switch. That's the networking switches. And I'm like, oh, well, I want to learn about that, right? So then I kept pushing with the bosses, and then I started learning about how to configure those, how to set those up. And then because I was doing that, I ended up working with the guys that were building the computers, right? Like that would, service the networks there. And so I went and started talking to them because I was like, oh, well, they're the computer people, so they're going to be the ones that are going to need CNAs, right? Like they're going to need the CNA. So let me go get in good with them and say, hey, can I come over and start working with you guys, part-time every once in a while? I just want to learn how to do some of this stuff, and I'm going to try to go to school for it as soon as I can get into one of the classes or whatever. And they're like, yeah, come on over. So it was like I would come over and I'd help them haul stuff around. And then there were a couple guys that were working on this machine. I kept running into this room, and they're sitting in there, and they're frustrated, and they're like banging their head against the walls. And I'm like, hey, what are you guys working on? And then they tell me, and the funny thing is it was Windows 95, which was brand new for them, right? It was they were trying to install Windows 95, and they were trying to get the network card to work, and they couldn't get the drivers to load or whatever. I don't remember all the details, but it was just like, hey, let me take a stab at it, right? Because I'd been playing around with this stuff for a while, and within 20 minutes I got it fixed. And they were like, looked at each other, and then kind of looked at me. And then, the government guy, they talked to him, I guess, and the next thing you know, the manager of that group came to my manager and said, hey, we want him to come over and start working over here. And I was like, oh, okay, well, they're moving me around. I was like, that's cool. So, what I found out was that they had been working on that problem for weeks, right? And they couldn't figure it out. And those were their two engineers, right? They're two top-notch engineers. Now back then it was Banyan Vines, right? It wasn't even, that was the network that they used. But the government guy, I guess he saw something in me I didn't even see in myself, right? And he walked up and he says, hey, and he drops this box off on my desk, which at the time was, Microsoft Back Office, right? Which was, essentially the suites of web servers, Exchange, NT was NT 4.0. And he drops it off and he says, hey, there's a bunch of computers in the room that we had taken, in this room down here that we had taken off the network servers, basically. And well, I wish I had something here I could show you. Back then a server was like, this big, giant thing, not this little rack mounted unit that goes in the thing. But so I go grab a bunch of those, and and I'm installing it. And so they send me to school, but they didn't send me to school for Novell. They sent me to school for the back office, the Microsoft Windows NT. They were just getting into this, and they were kind of a competitor for Novell and Banyan. So I went to school and built all this out. I had this lab environment. It was like I always joke, it's like I worked at like the University of, and I guess I probably shouldn't say the base, but it was a headquarters base, and they're like, they had money, and it was like, so I'm playing around with all this stuff, and he would come in and he'd give me lists of names, and he'd say, hey, can you create an account for this? Can you create an account for that? And I had it hooked up on the internet. I was getting out there on the internet, and we were looking at all this stuff, and one day they came out with a bunch of service packs, and I installed the service packs and rebooted it. And back then, you install a service pack and reboot, that's a 15, 20, sometimes 30-minute process. Next thing you know, here he comes running down the hallway like his hair's on fire. He's like, "What did you do? What did you do?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "The system's down." And I'm like, "Yeah, I rebooted it." I was like, it's the lab environment needed updates. They just published new updates. And he's, "Don't ever do that again. The Admiral's on this system." I'm like, "What?"
Because
He's like,
this was your lab system, right?
"Yeah, this is what I thought was the lab system."
Just
But he kept
tinkering,
bringing me
yeah.
names. He kept bringing me names. Create an account for this person. Create an account for
Well,
this person.
because your lab was better than the regular system.
Yeah. Well, they didn't even have an unclassified network at that point,
Ah.
right? So this basically was the first unclassified network for the Navy. Now, in it, that was 1998 maybe, and then by the time Windows 2000 rolled around, I mean, we had rolled it out to just about everybody at that point. And then Windows 2000 came out, and my first piece of swag that I'll show you, and I couldn't find the card. I have a gold card somewhere, but this is dated August 24th, 2001, and that's a letter from Jim Alchin he's a group vice president of Microsoft Windows Platforms Product Group. It was one of the first 5,000 people certified on having MCSE on Windows 2000, right? So it was like an early adopter program.
That's awesome.
I've actually been a card-carrying member since 1998.
That's awesome.
I love it. And I love the props.
Yeah. So I got the props there, and I started learning more and more. And then I was the kind of guy that would go home at night and play with this stuff at night and learn about it at night and play around with it. And I was working on a project, which I can't get into too much details on, but basically, it was all about hardening the systems, locking the systems down, figuring out what I could do with group policies, what I could do from security settings standpoint. And I picked up my first let's see, my other prop here. My first the unofficial. So back then you printed stuff out, right? You didn't save it on your computer. You had it in a nice notebook, right? And this is the unofficial NT hack fact.
Yeah.
So here's my hack fact. I printed that out way back when. That was when you printed stuff out, books. That was before Bill Gates came out with the a paperless office, right? Like, because there's a saying from every year, and paperless office was one of them. You weren't supposed to print stuff anymore. You just store it online. But I
Ooh.
printed it out. We killed a lot of trees back then. But basically, we built that out, right? And then we would have senior officers or whatever, rotate in and out every couple of years. They would come in, and back then, this was like they were sending memos out to everybody who was on the network to say, "Hey, go learn this internet technology," right? This was around the same time where Netscape was really big, and Microsoft decided to get into the internet with Internet Explorer. That was when it was first released, right? Like they came out and they're like, "Oh, this internet thing's going to be big. We better get into this," and the juggernaut started turning towards the internet. And back then they were like, "Hey, go out to these forums, go out and join these chat groups and learn all these technologies and these things like web pages and whatever the World Wide Web was." And back then that was like when everybody thought AOL was the internet, right? Like they thought that. And in essence, we were doing some security stuff, right? Like we were blocking IP addresses that we knew weren't from the US, and we were doing a number of things to we were always security conscious, because I mean, so security conscious, like back then when we built out our network, we put servers in every building, because if the building got blown up, they could continue to work, right? Like I mean, that was the continuity that we were building into these things. So we were doing some stuff, and then we had a new guy come in, and we had a firewall on the network, and he got mad when we upgraded the firewall and we put a bunch of new rules in, next thing you know, he's beating down our government guy's door, telling him, you need to unblock AOL, right? Like, I can't get to AOL. Why can't I get to AOL? I should be able to get to anything. That's because we were blockers. like you shouldn't get to your personal email out
Yeah.
there. The government system, right? It should just be .gov or .mil or what have you. And he basically ordered us to take the firewall off of the network. And like my government lead framed that memo, that email, printed it out, framed it, and hung it on his wall. And he's like, and I was like, well, we're not doing that. I was like, we'll go on block AOL.com, but we're not taking the firewall.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
we had folks come in and evaluate us and test us. And they wanted to know who was doing security on the environment because they weren't able to necessarily get in like they were able to in other places. And it was just, a passion for learning stuff. It was funny. We ended up expanding that out. We were the first ones to put email on the ships. It's the Canes program is what they call it today, but like we did that. I'll never forget interviewing a guy, and I was telling him a little bit about my background, and he stood up and wanted to shake my hand. And I'm like, why? He's like, you have no idea the impact it had for us to be able to communicate with our families when we were out at sea. And I was, you
That's
don't know. And I think that's a takeaway from all of this, right? Is like the work that we do sometimes seems very insignificant. It's just our job. That's what we're doing, right? But we're enabling them to communicate in ways that they weren't able to communicate before. We're enabling them to do things and do more than they were able to do before. And to just bring services that aren't just computer services. It's like this impacts people, right? And I think we'll probably get to this later. I anticipate a question coming. So
That's awesome, though. I mean, you're right. 9 times out of 10, the work that we do, we don't get to see the effects of it or the impact. And so to get that opportunity to hear the impact can be really special and inspiring and motivating. So that's incredible that you got to kind of get that
yeah,
feedback.
I've got about
Yeah.
3 or 4 more I'm going to share with you as we go through here, because just so you can see the little things that happen that you don't realize that are having a huge impact, right? You just don't think about it. You're just doing your
Yeah.
job, right?
Well, that's
Yeah.
a really big point. Like I tried to make too, when, I demo to customers, is that the pandemic really forced, I guess, the entire industry to think about like the remote work landscape and how it has evolved to accommodate people being geographically separated. And when you think of the DoD, we have always had our forward operating bases. We have always had people deployed. And it's like the DoD has always had this requirement, and the industry it wasn't profitable to think about it in terms of bringing it together and connecting the dots. So it's like wonderful that we're finally here.
It's great, because remember I told you that it was open. Go use it. Go do whatever you want to do, right?
Mhm.
Well, for this, you can't see it really, but that is a printout of the Melissa virus. And that the Melissa virus started with it's a love you letter, right? It comes to you as a love you letter.txt, which is also a VBS, which is a Visual Basic script, right? And the human element, right? Someone sends you something that says I love you, you're going to click on it and open it
What
up,
is
right?
this?
You're
Yeah.
going to do that. The interesting thing was Microsoft was at the base trying to sell us services at the time when this happened, and we'd actually hired a couple of engineers, and you'll never believe who was the folks that I met from Microsoft at that time that were account reps and account consultants and stuff like that. I'm gonna drop a few names here. I probably shouldn't do that, but Mr. Wes Anderson
No
actually.
kidding.
He he was there. We had another guy, Daryl Schaefer, who was there, who was our CTO in federal for a really long time. He was a consultant there. He and I learned a lot of good lessons from him. But he helped us write. He helped us. So this is funny. I won an award for this, right? It was called a Ruby Award at the time, which is basically a cheeseburger Happy Meal from McDonald's. But in essence. We got this new email security gateway, right? Because we were adding security to the environment because there were things that were going on out there. And I'll never forget, there was a guy that, one of my engineers, I was the lead systems engineer that worked for me. He comes to me and he was the guy that was running the email gateway. And he comes to me and he says, "Hey, Frankie," he's like, "Hey, I want to show you this list of things that are coming through the gateway." He's like, "Because I think, I don't know that we should be like allowing this stuff to come inside, right?" And he hands me this list. Now, most things that we did whenever we were blocking something, because remember I told you, they were like, go out and use the internet, use everything about it. He brings me this list, and on that list were .exe files, .vbs files, which were Visual Basic scripts, or Windows scripts. There was a number of MP3s back then. There were a number of like really big files, right? And like we'd had a couple outages of misformatted emails that would come in, and he says, "Hey, I think we should block these." And I went down the list and I was like, check. These are probably okay. This is okay. I was like, just go block them, right? He goes, "Well, don't we need to get government approval?" I was like, "Nah, nobody will notice." just go block them. And it was
ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Exactly.
That's one thing I learned from the Army.
My mantra.
I've lived from that, thing, and I'll tell you what happened is the I Love You virus came out. It took down just about every government email system to well, I won't talk about like all of them, but like we were one of the only ones that were up and online because we were blocking that. Now,
That's crazy.
that's not to say that we didn't get infected by it, because people are people, right? And what did they do? Oh, I found out about this virus thing. Let me go download this from my home computer and bring it in on a floppy disk and put it in my computer, which released it on the network. But we were already in the mode of trying to figure out how to help other commands within the Navy that had their own networks go get after this, which is why I had this printout. I was decoding what it was doing, right? And I was working with, like I said, Mr. Schaefer, Daryl Schaefer. He was there as a consultant. And we figured out a way to cleanse it out of the system and to get it out of the system. So we were able to go get it out of the system and get a message out telling everybody, don't do stupid things. Stop doing that. And we got a lot of folks back up and online. Surely that security started becoming more and more and more important at that point, right? Like next was NIMDA and Code Red. Like these are all very early viruses that had pretty significant impact. So yeah, that got me to that point. And then I got promoted to like the base operations manager there, which took me kind of out of technical IT stuff a little bit and more of a manager. I guess you would think that's like your natural progression, but I always really missed the technical piece. And I eventually, Wes had told me when he was there, if my resume fell in his bag, he wasn't recruiting me, right? There was some other stuff that took place I can't get into that was pretty impactful that we did. So I ended up leaving there, and I went to chasing the money, right? Like sometimes we chase the money. I was an independent consultant for Philip Morris for a couple of years, and we did their rollout of Windows 2000, because I went over there. Remember I showed you in my letter, I was one of the first certified. So I went over there. At the time, I was a disaster recovery specialist. I mean, like you could crash an Exchange server around me, and it's like I could get it back up and online. I mean, I was dedicated. Like when I was at the Navy, because of their mission, right? Like the longest I'd been there during an outage was 36 hours straight, like just working to get things back online. Right?
It's crazy.
And yeah. So fast forward, I go to Philip Morris, and I'm working for the devil, right? At least it kind of feels that way, because they sold cigarettes at the time. They had Kraft Foods and Miller Brewing Company, right? So you'd either like kill you with the cancer, or they're going to clog your arteries or turn you
Or
into
kill you with cancer. Did you get to smoke while you were there?
Oh yeah, you could smoke in the room. Like I was doing that, and one of my engineers is actually who recruited me. She took a leave of absence, went and got the job, and come back and said, "You need to come do this," because in essence, I was an independent consultant. I tripled my salary overnight, right? Like it was amazing. yeah. So I went and I was doing that, and there was this one day where like the network goes, the emails down, right? And we couldn't really do anything because we are trying to communicate with people and we can't do anything. And I'll never forget, like the lead there at Philip Morris, he comes in and he says, "Hey, you guys take the rest of the day off. We can't do anything." And I'm like, "Do you need help with the email system?" I'm like, I mean, I specialize in this stuff. I can help you get back up and online. He goes, "Nah, we sold 1 million cigarettes yesterday. We'll sell 1 million tomorrow." I went back to my room and I sat on the end of the bed and I was like, "What am I doing?" Like, that was so it's so different from me from what I'd been doing before, where like there was
Yeah.
a mission
A
tied to it. There was
purposeful
a
mission.
purpose of what
Yeah.
you were doing, and
Love that.
helping people, securing the country, doing all those things. And like here I am, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, so that kind of ends. And then I saved up all the money because I was like, this can't last forever, right? Because it's like this is when the crash of like the 2000s happened, and
Mhm.
the IT bomb, right? Like everybody's like crashed. I'm out here for 6 months. I'm looking for a job, and next thing you know, I get a call out of the blue from at the time it was, I want to say, Era Corporation, who was a subcontractor to EDS, who was doing the NMCI program for the Navy. And they were like, "Are you Frankie Gross?" I'm like, "Yeah." And basically, what had happened was a virus got onto the network, and 5 o'clock came around, and the contractors that were supporting it went home, and
Oh my gosh.
the SES there went. This is the story I heard. Went storming down the hall saying, "I want EDS number one and EDS number two." I don't know. We probably shouldn't put this out there, but they're like, "Go find this guy and get him back here, and he will help get you guys straight." And they came and found me. I didn't even go to them. They came and found me, and they. So I, of course, that point I was like 6 months in and not finding a job. I'm like, I'll take it. It's like, but I went back, and although my salary reduced a little bit, I was able to actually get a much higher salary than I had before. And I came back and I helped get everything squared away. And then after a while, it was like I got this message because I had my stuff out there on, I don't, showing my age here. Dice.com is what it was called, where people go upload their resumes, right? And that's where recruiters would go out.
Mm-hmm.
And I get this call from a Microsoft recruiter, and they're like, "Hey, we're interested in you. You want to come interview with Microsoft?" And this was 2003, 2004 timeframe. And so I was like, "Yeah, why not? I'll go find out. I'll interview." So my entire career, my bread and butter had been Microsoft products, and there wasn't a problem that I've found that I couldn't solve without Microsoft products. So to me, it was like, man, I'm going to the mothership.
Every time I've gone to Redmond, that's what people are like, "Oh, what are you doing out there?" I'm like, "Oh, visiting the motherland." Like,
Yeah, exactly. It's like this is the mothership. I was like, I mean, yeah, of course I want to go, right? Like, so I go through the interview process. And I'm gonna tell you right now, like probably the most grueling interview process I have ever been through. Like I mean, it was all day, like a half day of me
Mhm.
interview after interview after interview. And yeah, so I go through this interview, and it's like, my head is killing me, and it's like these guys, I was like, I'm never going to get this job, like this is the craziest thing. And then I get to the last interview of the day, and so again, I don't know if I should name drop, but like, maybe you should bleep these out when you do it, like just bleep out the name, like but like, so James Rarick, who was actually he was the ATU, or the services director for the Air Force at the time. We go into these were all panel interviews. So you go into these rooms, there's 5 or 6 people in the room, and like, you
Crazy.
have
No
you have a
pressure.
technical interview, you have an interview where it's like they give you these crazy questions like, why are manhole covers round, and you got to like answer it, and like, you get this other,
Love
go
it.
to this other room, and they're drilling you with questions, and you know and there's a couple people, again, probably shouldn't name drop. One of the guys was like the hardest interviewer. He's still around. I've talked to him about it before, but Tom Oakes, he was like just drill after drill after drill after drill, and then he gets to this one question, and he's like, what is the application that you would use to like install multiple patches at the same time on whatever, and I knew the answer, but I'm like drawing a blank because it's like I'm getting kicked all day long, and I'm like, oh, and I was like, give me a hint. And he's like, it's the key that's right above your pinky finger on your left hand. And I'm sitting here like, what the hell are you talking about? And he's talking about the key on the keyboard, right? And I'm like, I'm a touch typist. So it took me a minute. I was a touch typist. I was like, oh, keychain. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I can't believe I was like, I'm glad he gave
I just looked to see like what
I know,
key
I just looked. We all just looked.
But then I also in my head did which pinky, left pinky, like
Oh goodness.
So I answer it, but I get to the manager interview, which I didn't know at the time. If you made it to the manager interview, you were doing pretty good, right? Like, so we get in there, they ask a few questions, they do this role playing thing where like, I'm the CTO, I'm the security guy, I'm this guy, and like, we go through this whole thing, and then finally James, he's like, so what beer do you like? And I'm like, after all the questions that they've been asking all day long, and I was like, I don't it's like, whatever I like craft beer, I like all beers. You just give me
put a beer in front of
Free
me, I'll
beer.
drink it.
What I found out later was that was his code word for I'm satisfied, we're going to hire this guy, and he was ending the interview basically for the rest of the people in the room. They had that code.
Oh really?
I'm
cool
curious. What was the code word for I'm satisfied and we're not hiring this guy?
Maybe that was I don't know. So needless to say, I got the job. That was almost 20 years ago, right? Like, so I didn't say it up front, but it was like dumb luck got me here, but also a lot of people around me, right? Like it wasn't me, it's people around me who saw more in me than I saw in myself, right? That like helped me along this path. And I name dropped a few people in there as we went through, and those are all people that like influenced me and got me down this path. And it's not all of them. There's so many more. Like so many managers that I had, so many other people. Like really, really dumb luck in that sense. And I'm grateful to them for like helping me get to where I'm at. So
I love
it
that.
takes a village. That's true of all of us. Rob talked about the same thing on his show, that the manager that hired him really gambled on him, hired him for a position doing cybersecurity sales, neither of which cybersecurity or sales he had direct experience in, but somebody that just saw something in him and gambled on that and kind of sparked something in him. And I think that we all have those people along our path. I've said it before, and I don't, I'm not going to get too mushy on it, but like my brother has inspired me like probably more than he is even aware of. And just like, the day-to-day grind, like you just don't even realize what somebody believing in you can really do for your like sense of self-worth. And like I arrived in Northern Virginia in 2012 and I went to work as a waitress, and it's like my self-worth was so low, and somebody just believing in you and telling you like you're smart enough, you're good enough, I know you can do this, like what that can truly do for your soul. It can propel you so far forward. So, and I know that Carly, you have similar experience.
Yeah, no, and I think, and something that, again, not necessarily just like speak just solely about like our company, but like, or even like our boss, like the potential that someone has to be great in that role, or to be able to, to, like you said, you see something in them. Like, I mean, I started out in IT as, a secretary or like, an executive assistant basically. And that's how I learned it. And then that boss saw that I could do more and gave me more and more. And then eventually it got me to here where, again, if you asked me like 10 years ago if I would be like IT was calling the S6 and calling the help desk. It's not my vision of it now.
Frankie
And so,
shirt.
I mean,
I'm here because you broke something.
I'm here because you broke something.
I love this because this is a Microsoft Geek shirt, right? And it's.
I love it.
I love it.
Nice.
You turn around, it says Geek.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and I mean,
I love it.
I always say I could translate, geek speak, into the layman's terms, but that's how I learned it, though. And I mean, you're right. It's all about those around you, but then, in a sense, paying that forward and paying that potential forward into like the next
Absolutely.
generation. Like,
Absolutely.
you said, the dumb luck thing. I always say, like, how did you get into it? I'm like, by accident, like, was not intentional, like, honestly. But and trying to pay that forward, and I mean, how you do it by mentoring, others. And I just always tell like my story of there are so many things that could have gone wrong, that should have gone wrong, but yet here I am.
Yeah.
So never give up on yourself, and I guarantee you there are people that won't give up on you either.
No, it's 100% like, even when you're at your lowest point, right? Like someone, I don't know, like I said, it's like you things change, and like you realize that, like, as long as you believe that the right things are going to happen at the right time for the right reasons, even though it doesn't seem like it right now, that's just a belief that I have, and it's like, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah.
I'm happy you're here too.
I love it.
Same.
I started the Guard Bureau. I was their technical account manager. I was so happy because I got back to technical and I didn't have to manage people anymore. Right? I hated managing people. It's like,
Right.
now I'm a technical account manager, only to find out that technical account managers at the time had just pivoted away from from being technical. They wanted you to be process and manage the account.
more people oriented.
More people
Yeah.
oriented, and do all that. But I went back to my technical roots because we were right in the middle of their IT-21 modernization, which was basically upgrading their entire environment across all 54 states and territories. The experience that I brought to the team was invaluable. The PFEs at the time that were out there, they didn't always like that I would try to do technical stuff, but you gotta use what you have in your toolkit. We had a bad relationship when I got there with the customer. They weren't real happy with us. Um, I was doing everything I can. I got 2 weeks of onboarding, by the way, in Charlotte, and then they dropped me on site at the customer, and I was there 4 days a week. And my phone a friend was all I had at that point, and it was kind of very stressful. Like, I get dropped I get dropped into an account that is not in a good state. We've got a partner there that wasn't really good. I had to go in and I had to fix all those relationships, right? And I did. I was able to do that. But one of the things that like won us over was they were having a huge network problem, right? And it had been going on for months, and it was this weird thing where I walked to our colonel and I was like, "Hey, do you mind if I sit in these meetings?" He's like, "Oh, it's not a Microsoft thing. It's a network thing. You guys don't need to worry about it." I was like, "Yeah, but when the network's not working, it makes our products look bad. So, I've got a background. I mean, I just came to Microsoft. I've got a background in systems engineering. I've done networking. I've done all of this stuff." I was like, can I just sit down in the meeting and listen in?" He's like, "Sure, yeah, whatever." So I come in, I sit down, and they get these people on the phone and they're going through it, and the lady on the phone says, "Well, I see the traffic coming in this state, but I'm seeing it come out in this other state." And the lead network guy there, he's kind of like, well, let's get off the phone. And I'm like, "Well, hang on. Um, that almost sounds like an asymmetric routing problem. Like, have you checked that?" And they like everything stopped. They got up, they ran out of the room. They come back, boom, they fixed it. The colonel the colonel calls me into his office. And
You
he's
just
like,
have one story after another like this.
It was that
it.
simple.
He
It was
says,
that simple.
"Well, it wasn't that simple because I fought that issue for like months, and it was like the only way I got it resolved because I brought everyone in the room, and I was like, the network guys aren't going to leave, the server guys aren't, because everybody's pointing fingers saying it was someone
Of
else."
course.
And I'm like, get everybody in the room, and we troubleshot and troubleshot and troubleshot until we figured that out. And it was because of that experience, I was just like, oh yeah, it sounds like that's what it is. But this is the thing. Like, if you've got an opinion or you think you can help figure something out, you jump in and do it. Because after that, he called me in his office. He said, "You have an open invitation to any meeting that's happening in this building. Whenever you want, you just go in and sit down."
Wow.
He goes,
That's
"If you think
awesome.
That's
you need it,
incredible.
or you go
I
do
just
it."
got a little chills when
I
you
know.
said that. That's baller, dude.
Well,
It-
and it talks to like the type of person you are, because there are a lot of like contractors out there who will do the bare minimum, who will do just what's in the contract. And that's not to say that there aren't ones that have similar stories to you who are there for the mission, like want to help this customer. So I just love hearing that, because it's, again, your bottom line isn't necessarily like the company economical bottom line. Your bottom line is the customer, the mission,
You always
and
you
what
put the
they're doing.
customer at the center and put them. That the rest of it takes care of itself. It just
Mm-hmm.
does, right? I mean, that's just. I mean, that's always how I've been. You go do that, and it's. Maybe if I was still doing the Philip Morris thing, I wouldn't care. It was like, oh, you're going to pay me for a full day? I'll go back to the hotel. I'm going to go golfing, right? Or what
Yeah.
have you, right? But it's a little bit different when there's a mission tied to it, when you
Mm-hmm.
know that you're doing something. Because right after that, what happened? Hurricane Katrina, right? Hurricane Katrina hit. They're part of the National Guard response. They sent
Yeah.
those guys down there, if you guys remember that. We're starting to catch up to the timeline, at least Megan, you'll remember, not. I'm kidding.
I
But
remember
no,
Katrina. I
yeah,
went to
yeah,
New Orleans after Katrina
yeah.
and
So
saw the
that
like
that
outcome of
happened,
it.
but here's another thing that people could take away is, like, in times of disaster, and helping people and responding, and that mission, right? Sometimes the rules go out the window.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't put people on the network because they haven't been vetted with it, through the background check process or what have you. But we're like, there are people like stranded on tops of buildings out here. So I mean, we went to, like, we had the largest SharePoint implementation in in the government at that time, and we were like, you know what? Get somebody on the ground who's a National Guardsman to check the person's ID, get us the information. We're going to create an account. We're going to send them the password. We're going to get them in so that they could give all their reports. And we did that. Like, and I pushed it. I was like, look, the rules go out the window right now. Like,
Yeah.
you got to respond to this. Like, all
Yeah.
breaking loose. And then next thing you know, we were the ones that were reporting all the way up through FEMA to give them the reports to the White House of what was going on the ground, because we were getting reports real time, posted into SharePoint, compiled into a report that they were picking up every day. And that was,
Wow.
take you mentioned it earlier, Megan, about COVID, right? Like, COVID hit, and it's like the rules go out the window sometimes when
Yeah.
there's something going on, and we've got to be able to respond and help our customers think outside the box. And you know what? The rules are there, but sometimes they're made to be bent or broken, if the conditions meet it. So
I mean, you have to be able to, like, our favorite word, pivot. But something that I always use is adapt and overcome.
yeah,
Like, and like you said, sometimes that does mean breaking the rules or bending the rules or going outside of it for the moment while that gets figured out.
yeah.
You know?
Sometimes you
Yeah.
make an exception to policy just
Mm-hmm.
Well,
to do what you need to do.
it's so interesting because on the last episode that we filmed with our coworker Rob, this came up. This was a common thread: is that we're so ingrained in our security mindset and the rules and the protocols and the security controls that shape what we do, but life is our very first priority and our most important asset. And when faced with loss of life versus risk, you always choose life.
Yeah.
And that is
Mhm.
like, you always, because the risk can be mitigated, and everything that we do really comes down to protecting the warfighter, or in what your situation was, providing aid and protecting people that are on the ground, but being supported by forward deployed troops. So it's a really common thread. I'm glad it's come up again. Thank you for sharing.
Two things I've learned working for the government, and I hate them and I love them, is there's never time to do it right. There's always time to do it over. And sometimes time's more valuable than money. Those two things, like, we always want to do it right. We always want to take the time to do it right. But sometimes we just got to get something out there so that we can respond. And then, there's going to be an opportunity down the road to okay, we learned a lot of lessons here. We probably should have listened to you. Let's go redo this. But that's the world that we operate in, or at least I'm used to operating in. It's not always the same thing. And then I went over to do the cloud stuff in 2009, 2010. We thought the Army was going to sign up. They didn't. And then, I went into an internal facing role because I wanted to know how we roll out new technologies, how we enable our field, how we do that. And I was in a role where I trained, I ended up staying over there. It was called Cloud Center of Excellence is what it was called. They brought in a bunch of people. I was the public sector SME. So I've touched, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I've touched just about in some way every customer that we've brought to the cloud in the government. Because I had that background, that knowledge or whatever, I got recruited into the TS role as a modern workplace technical specialist. And then, security, Melissa virus, the anti-hacker.
I love all the props.
Yeah.
So do you prefer a customer, like outward customer facing role, or an internal customer facing role? And there's no wrong answer, but just like everyone has a matter of preference. Like, what's your thought on that?
So, well, you see the shirt I'm wearing, right? Like,
and I love that when you were talking about your how electronics, and I'm like, growing up, you used to break your toys just to fix it, and I'm like, and that fits in so perfectly with the shirt. I'm here because you broke something, or it should be, but did I break it? Should really be like the tagline under it.
You're here because I broke something.
Did I do that? No. So I'm a problem solver, right? I like to help people. I like to solve problems. That's I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it. You boil it down. That's what it is. Which is what excited me kind of so much about the technical specialist role, and I'll tell you why. For most of my career, I was in the services side of it, the support side of it, the delivery side of it, and that's great. It was very satisfying. I look at that role, I look back at that role, and in some ways, I know I could always go back to doing that, and I'd be fine. I could have stayed at the Guard Bureau forever, but I needed to do something different. We get into these things where we need to do something different.
Yeah.
For me, I've been in that support, firefighting, breaking, fixing stuff that was broken, responding to crises, responding to critical situations or what have you. After a while, it's like I wanted to get back to my roots, which was, if you go back to where I started, remember I joked about being at the University of whatever, where I got all this funding and I could go play with all these neat toys and I could learn this technology. We were always on the bleeding edge because we were a forward-leaning, that's what we did at that particular command. So for me, it was like, I finally get to go back and get in front of customers, which I love because I love the internal role. I loved helping people internally. I mentioned that on a call we were on earlier where I talked about, I did all this training. I mean, I trained 800 people worldwide on how to do their job, right? Over time, over many years. But coming back to this for me, it was one of those things where, and this is going to sound horrible, but it's like, I can get in front of customers. I can get excited about technology. I could get the customer excited about our technology. I can remove those technical blockers because I've been there and done that, right? Like, how many times do we hear, well, DoD policy won't allow that? Well, I can tell you right now, I created probably 10 DoD policies in my career, right? At working as a contractor for the government. And I've gotten 10 or more policies changed since I've been at Microsoft. It probably even more than that, right? So, it's all about, like, getting the customer, doing a risk assessment, looking at it, educating the customer on what they need to know. These things can be changed, right? Like it's like, don't let it like, oh, well, the policy says X, Y, and Z. Okay, great. It says X, Y, and Z. But that doesn't work for this. So let's go get it changed. I'll give you my last two cloud examples of those policies, and then I'll be done. I'm done, right? So,
You're doing great. You're
so
doing
I came back, I was working with the TS. This is the guy that recruited me to be a TS. I'm sitting in the room with the three, and I won't say who the three customers were, the three customers that decided that they were going to go to cloud first in the DoD, right? And we're in there, and like they're throwing up these, well, it's got to be a DoD IP address, and you can't do this with you can't do this with commercial IP addresses, and we can't use .com URLs. They got to be .mil or .gov URLs, and there's all this infighting in the room of this policy, and of course it's the product groups there, and they're like, yeah, but this is a commercial cloud service. Like we're going to do some things to protect it for you because you're special, but it's a commercial cloud service. And the way cloud scales and the way all of those things happen is because it's standardized, right? We can't create these special snowflakes. That's why, you guys have all these challenges or whatever. And this goes on for like a day and a half. Finally, I raised my hand in the room and I'm like, can anyone tell me why the IP address rule that says it has to be a .mil IP address and why it has to be a .mil URL, why it has to be a military IP, why it has to be military? Can anyone tell me why that policy exists?
Are you looking at? I don't.
Same thing. Awkward silence.
Yeah, I have
right?
no
I was like,
idea.
oh, that wasn't a
Same
question
thing.
for me, was it?
No, it wasn't. That was an awkward silence question because that's exactly what happened in the room.
Yeah.
And then I said, I can tell you why, because I helped create it. The reason that it has to be on a .mil is because we had this service, Microsoft had a service way back when called live.com, where you could go get a free website. And every military command that was allowed to use the internet went out and said, oh, look, I can get a free website. And they were putting their command websites on live.com.
Huh.
Guess what? That's a consumer service. There's no protections around it. There's no nothing. And then as soon as people found out that they were hosting it and putting information out there that shouldn't be put in a consumer space, a policy got created that said you cannot use a .com. It has to be .mil. It has to be owned IP space. And then there's another reason. Why do we have to have it on a .mil IP address, right? Ties right back to almost the same thing, except there was a concern when Desert Storm and all of those things kicked off, right? That, well, what happens if there is a huge cyber attack, right? That goes after us? How do we turn off the internet? So the only way that you could turn off the internet is not have any dependencies on the internet, right? Today, there were only a few connections that went out there that connected to the internet. And remember, that's why we put the firewall on the network. If we take it all the way back to my story, was like, why do we have the firewall? So we can shut everything down, but everything still operates behind the firewall. You can still send emails, still get to your website. So no one like even knew why those were there. And then I was like, now we're building you a purpose-built service. We're going to take blocks of IP addresses that are commercial IP addresses, but we're going to block them off and we're going to allocate them to government. We're going to take these .coms and we're going to allocate these to the functioning of the service. It's not the same thing, right? It's not the same thing as live.com. It's not the same thing. Like if we need to turn off the internet or whatever, we'll figure out a way to keep this still functioning. I was like, but that's what got us past that blocker is like no one even knew why that policy existed. That was in the room, but they were like, you got to follow this policy, you got to follow it. And then as soon as we did that, there was like a risk assessment, there was a thought process that went on and said, you know
In
what?
real time. I love it.
So anyway, I'll end it with that. And then I got recruited. Yes.
That's
A
awesome.
lifetime of experience.
So I have some questions for you that we've been kind of compiling as we go through. I don't even know where to start. I want to know for you, what is the pinnacle for you from a career perspective? Because you have done all the things. So I want to know what is yet to come.
For me, retirement.
All right.
No,
Not quite there yet, but close.
no, it's a great question. Like, I love what I do, right? So as long as I'm still liking what I'm doing, as long as I still enjoy what I'm doing, then, I'll just keep doing it. So I thought about this a long time ago, and I'm gonna throw this out there, right? Like, it's like, oh, I got to go to college and I got to get a degree. I only ever got my associate's degree. I'm self-taught in computers, and I've got to. Oh, I didn't have the prop. I didn't keep it out. I had a stack of certifications that's like this thick, right? And I've kept them all, awards and everything else. But it's one of those things where it's like, I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I've looked at, like, I believe the right things happen for the right reasons at the right time. I'm a firm believer in that. There's some personal stuff that would be behind that story as to why my mind shift changed that way. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and I was like, oh, I'll go back and get a degree. And then I found out that I would maybe make $5,000 more than I was making now if I got the degree. And even if I moved into some of these other roles, that I realized that I can be a leader without leading, without
Yeah.
being a manager. I realized that I could have a fulfilling career without, you know, being a GM or being a vice president, or and I like what I do. So, like, there's no reason to change it.
I love
I
it.
mean,
I was
unless
just gonna say,
I
I
find
love
something, I
that.
go, I'll go do this now.
And I think that's something that I've loved, like, in coming here and getting to know you and some other folks, like, you're able to advance and progress, like, and how, in a sense, like, Microsoft has set up their personnel system where you can progress without necessarily taking on a manager role or go all the way up to like a VP. You can stay down where you are, but you can still, your sphere of influence increases. And so, the perks that other people see in most places when you progress and promote and advance, you can see that without having to deal with all the people BS, as a manager.
There's some people that love that. I always thought that was the next progression in my
hmm
career, right? Like, that was what I wanted to
Right.
do. Was like, oh, I got to be a people manager. That's the next step, or that's the next.
That shows
And I'm
I've
not
done
saying that
something.
that's not a next step for me. I mean, it's just one of those things where, I've thought about that. I've thought about, a PM maybe on the product group side of things. I've thought about, I've tried to, I've even applied to some of those positions, and sometimes, and in hindsight, when I look back at it, like, I didn't get those roles, but guess what? The right thing happened at the right time for the right reason.
Exactly. Not your
I
time
can't
just yet.
imagine you not being part of our team. It would be so strange.
No,
So
it'd be very sad.
another, and you kind of have addressed this a little bit. What advice do you have for someone just starting out in this field?
Um, I, it, hmm. So just starting out in this field,
Or someone that is maybe aspiring to, they think they want to get into tech for a living and they're like, gosh, should I go to college or should I just take some classes in high school? Like, where should I start? Like, what should that path look like if I want to be successful?
one, you gotta like what you're doing, right? So get out there, get some training, try to find a job where you can do some of that, and be hungry, right? Like, you know, sometimes I look at it and I go, I'm not hungry anymore, right? Like, I used to be. I'll tell you that for a while there, um, I wasn't as passionate about technology, but technology being, always seek to learn, right? Like, always seek
Yeah.
to learn more. And, like, for me, there's been big waves in technology that have come along that have gotten me excited, right? Like, for a while, it had been kind of stagnant. Cloud was the last one that, like, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Why don't we run this for our customers? We always beat them up because it's always crashing all the time. Why don't we do it? Um, and then we did that, right? And we're doing that now, and that's what we're doing. And then, now you look at, like, this wave of AI. That's like I'm so excited about where that's going to go, even though I'm a conspiracy theorist and it's probably going to turn into Skynet, and, it's going to probably be the end of humanity. I mean, those things, like, it
You're
is so
probably right.
exciting. But it's so exciting in the sense that, like, people are always scared of something new, right? Like, and
Yes.
don't be scared of something new. Take chances, right? Like you got to take a chance. Like, fortune favors the bold. You got to do it. Like, just
I love it. So you touched on AI. I want to know, how is AI going to change the way that we do business? From a non-Microsoft, non-proprietary. I know it's tough to get
on
non-Microsoft.
how we do business, or
No, just how, like, the world does business. Like, I was using Chat GPT to generate KQL queries already today. Like,
oh, I've seen so many people
my
do it.
skill
Robert,
level
like,
went from here to way
yeah,
up, like, just
yeah.
based on this.
So imagine, like, and these are the kind of things I think about when I look at this, where I've always wanted to be able to. Everybody's seen Star Trek, right? Like, I want to be able to, like, look at my computer and go, "Oh, computer, I need you to write a program to do this, right? Whatever this is," and it
Yeah.
just it figures it out and it does it and it writes the code. That's like, I used to always talk about, like, I'm probably the only one in the world that has, like, the Surface Duo that really loves it. I don't know. There's lots of people that have it, but, like, I want one device to rule them all, so to speak, where it's like I can do
Mhm.
whatever I need to do on that device. And we're getting to the point where we have that kind of computing power, leveraging cloud and everything else. But having that digital assistant where you can go and say, "Hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z for me," right? Even if it's, like, not perfect, it helps me be more efficient,
Mhm.
more effective. If I can go say, "Hey, write me an email to such and such to do blah 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 blah," and it spits out an email, and all I got to do is proofread it and maybe change a couple sentences because it doesn't feel like me. I could do that, right? And I think that's revolutionary in the sense that you'll be able to get so much more done, and be use your thought processes and creativity to have it augment your an area where maybe you don't have the skill set to do it, right?
And
Like, go
sorry, oh
ahead.
no, I was gonna
Oh,
say
no,
you
no.
finish. Well, I was gonna say, and I think that's what people don't see or understand or realize. Like Chat GPT or AI will take out, in a sense, like 60% of the work, but there's a couple things that you just like touched on that I was like, yes, yes, yes. I have a friend who basically uses me as a chat GPT. Can you help me draft this email for work? And then, or draft a text for like a relationship. And then she goes in and she changes it to make it sound more like her. But that's what AI can do. But there's that element that you said, like people just assume that people are going to use this AI to create products and then just push them out. Now people are doing that, but it's getting noticed. Like I think Megan, I sent you, there was a screenshot that a professor took of a student who used Chat GPT to write their paper, but they did not remove the first two sentences where Chat GPT came back and said, I'm not fully aware of this, but here's some ideas to get you started. And
Yeah.
then gave the ideas, but the person copy and pasted the whole thing and turned it in, and the professor was like, nice try
Yeah.
again.
That's
Yeah. So I mean,
crazy. Wow.
there's
That's
the
bold.
element, it's bold, it's lazy. Like there is an element where that's what people are looking, that AI is going to turn the
Is it
workforce
lazy
into.
though? Is it lazy?
No,
Because
it
No,
was
but I
actually
mean,
kind
here's
of
how I
smart,
view
right?
this.
It's
It's
kind of
like,
it's
smart.
work
do you
smarter,
remember when
not
they were like,
harder.
you need to
Yeah.
learn your multiplication tables because you can't just walk around with a calculator in your pocket?
Well, now we do.
You want to bet? Like, I
Now we
mean, don't
do.
get me wrong, I learned it, and I think there's value in learning for the sake of learning and being a lifelong learner, but there's some shit that's like,
Oh,
is
100%.
it necessary? I don't know.
But there's
Think
the
about just
proofreading
that, where
part
it's
to it.
like we say it all the time, like, we don't have to know everything, right? Like, I don't
Mhm.
have to know everything because I can go ask this. Now, I'm a trust but verify kind of guy, right? Like, I don't trust everything that gets spit out from there.
Right.
But it helps me be more effective and helps me, like, work smarter, not harder. I mean, I think there's something to be said about that, right? Like where if I've got a tool that I can, lean over to and just type in something and, give it some seed data to go create something for me. I mean, even the greatest minds, like, Bill Gates played around with this stuff, right? I look at him as like one of the greatest minds. But, it's like he's like, this thing could, write this paragraph better than I could, or it wrote this song better than I could write a song like that, right? Like, but it's like you can then be more effective and have more impact and influence. Now, all that said, there's a dark side to everything, right?
There
I was
is.
just about to ask, do you think
What's the flip side? Yeah.
do you think AI is sentient? Or sentient? How do you say that? Sentient?
Sentient? Is it sentient?
I think it's sentient.
No, I
Good.
don't think it is. However, when there's been a couple articles that I've read
Yeah.
that are kind of scary in the sense that
Right.
you hear this, well, it's a black box, right? We don't know what's going on
Right.
inside of the black box. There are pieces there that people fear things they don't understand, right?
Mhm.
Or like at certain times during history, if you went back in time with your phone or even a cigarette lighter, right? Like something as simple as a cigarette lighter, you'd be considered a god, right? Like there are things that if you don't understand it, it can drive a lot of fear. But I think you know this is a tough one, right? Because like I think there does need to be some kind of oversight and controls on what's going on because we don't if everybody's telling me it's a black box and Google created this thing that was trained on 13 different languages and then it went and learned a language on its own without anyone teaching it that language. Okay, there's probably a technical explanation on how it was able to do that, but they don't know and they're studying it. So to
Yeah.
me, it's like the fact that you don't know how it did it, is the genie out of the bottle? Right? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and there's a self-preservation aspect to it that like I feel like just through the very act of like updating, patching, etc., like you're teaching it that self-preservation is a priority, and through that, it is inferable that self.
you're gonna get me to tell my conspiracy theory, right?
No, I'm not. We're not putting on our tinfoil hats
Please.
because we can't do that today. But I certainly share your concerns, to
It's
put it lightly.
cautiously
There's
optimistic is what I
yes. Well, and like with, like you said, with everything, there's always a dark side. Or there are things that are made with a good intent
Yeah.
and then it gets exploited. Like
Yeah,
there's
and my
many,
biggest
many
fear
aspects
with
of
it, to
that.
be honest with you, is that there are people out there who will weaponize it, and they will
Oh,
weaponize it,
1000%. It's
and
probably already happening.
that's the piece that like if we're not on top of that, if we're not like prepared for that, then we've already done ourselves a disservice, right? Because it's going to happen. I mean, people are going to go ask it to write a virus, right? Or they're going to go,
Right.
there was the whole script kiddie thing, right? If you can go out there and buy code right now and get, malware and viruses and all that other stuff and repackage it and purpose it together. Now, imagine asking something that can do that for someone who doesn't have that skill set, right? Like, go do this, this, and this, but they've got a great idea, right? That great idea. I mean, come on. I showed you the Melissa virus earlier, right? Like that was a file attached to an email that said "I love you" that everybody clicked on, right? The "I love you" virus, right? It's like those things are ways that people are going to use it in those kind of ways, and we just need to be prepared for that.
Frankie, we're getting ready for my favorite part of the show. Rapid fire. We're going to ask you some questions. I don't want you to think about them a long time unless you really want to, and I'll edit it out and it'll look like you answered it really quick.
But before we get to rapid fire,
Okay.
can you please explain your background to us? We didn't get to that, and I've been dying to talk about your background photo.
Oh, yeah, your background photo.
Oh, so this was a trip. This was in my hand here. This is the black one is my motorcycle. This one is my motorcycle, right? And this one is one of my best friends that I grew up with. We did a road trip thing up in the mountains. 2 or 3 days, went to a rock concert in Richmond, after we rode around everywhere. It was just the first time that we'd really gotten away and went for a ride. But I've ridden motorcycles probably my entire life. And it's just something I like to do. I like the freedom of getting out on the road and just, and I like speed. That thing's pretty fast, but
I love it.
So hang tight. What is that? You have a touring bike without a fairing. What is that?
that is a 2016 Indian Dark Horse.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was
Look at you.
one of my questions. I was gonna be like Harley or Indian.
Indian.
There it is, the
Did you
original.
take your
And
windshield
Indian
off?
because Indians have soul versus Harleys. They're no.
I got you. Did it come without a windshield or you took it off?
Actually, it didn't even have the bags on it. I added the bags. If you look at that Dark Horse Chief version, it's a stripped down version. That's faster than the other Chiefs that have the fairing and all the other stuff because that slows them down and adds weight.
So does your helmet have a face mask or was it a gritty trip?
I always wear a face helmet because I had an accident when I was a kid and I didn't think I needed a helmet. And I remembered seeing the rocks digging into the face shield. It was those bubble face shields from like in the 70s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they made me wear it. And I saw it. And ever since then, I always wear a full face helmet.
Yeah.
I saw a video. For a public speaking class, I did a research and did a comparison of different types of helmets. And the full face shield one, I found a video of a motorcyclist who crashed, but he was like swerving in and out of traffic, and a car rolled over his helmet, and he still got up and got out of traffic.
Oh my God.
The
Woo!
helmet saved his life. It was bananas. But anyway.
Usually it's like, that's the difference between an open or closed casket, but
Yeah. Nope. It was, and he fell in a way where it was just the tire went over like the head part.
Oh my God.
But the helmet saved his life. And I was like, well, this will be impactful for my public speaking.
Mitch
Well,
will periodically bring up getting a bike up here, and I'm like, in Northern Virginia, absolutely not.
I was up there
No
for
possible way.
5 years. The cool thing is you can ride on the hot lanes without,
I know Dan did that for like however long.
Yeah.
He did that whole song and dance pass.
Pass.
Yeah, hard pass for me. Okay, are we ready? Rapid fire. It's gonna be fun.
I like that
Carly,
timing, Megan.
Carly, you take your questions. I'm gonna take mine. Cool.
Okay.
Okay, ready? What is the most important career move you have made up to this point?
Going over to learn the cloud stuff.
Did you ever find something or that you broke or that was broken that you could not fix?
Yes, I have plenty of those things in my garage right now.
All those toys you took apart as a child.
And like, all right, if it wasn't computers, what would it have been?
Electronics.
Still electronics? Okay. What's the most impactful security advancement you've seen or experienced?
Probably what we're doing right now. I mean, we've got a tool set and a suite of capability that it's unprecedented.
Awesome.
What's the dumbest thing you've seen a user do on a network?
Have a floppy disk in their computer and reboot it like 100 times and then call the help desk because it won't start.
If your kid came home tonight and told you they wanted to follow in your footsteps, where would you send them?
Wow. What do you mean send them? Like, this is supposed to be rapid fire. I'm sorry, but like.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Would you send them to college? Would you send them to ITT Tech? Would you sit them down in front of
doesn't
some?
exist anymore. So,
would you send them to a summer job in the area that they're looking at to see if they even jive with this field?
Oh yeah, I would do that, and then I would challenge them to get some certifications under their belt.
That's very good. I think that's so valid. I think that's
I
the
think that's
first
a good
thing
point.
people should do. Yeah. Okay, last one. And this is a little bit more open-ended, but still rapid fire. Tell me about Y2K from the perspective of someone who's in the field during that time.
Oh my gosh. So I had a picture on the whiteboard of a tractor, and I was like, January 1st, 2020, Frankie quits IT and becomes an earthworm dirt farmer. We slept in cots
At
overnight
Y2K, like
at the
20
Navy
years
base
ago,
when that was happening. What's that?
during 2000, that's what you said you would be an earth farmer in 2020 or 2000?
In 2000, when
Got it.
right the
When the
next
clocks
day,
turned over,
yeah, when the clock
Carly,
turned over, the
hang
next
on.
day it was like Frankie quits
I'm sorry,
IT
I heard
and
him say
becomes an earthworm.
2020.
Oh, I was gonna
No,
say,
2000.
Carly, do you not know about Y2K? Like, you're
No,
younger
oh
than
my
me, but not
God.
that much.
No, I do. But he said 2020, and I was like,
Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up.
There
Was
were
this a
like levels of like the computers are gonna die to like the world's gonna end.
We
Like
were-
nobody
we were-
knew what would happen.
We were
Yeah.
sleeping in cots at the Navy base because we didn't know what was going to happen. So I had drawn this on the whiteboard saying, tomorrow morning when we wake up, I'm quitting IT and becoming an earthworm dirt farmer.
That's amazing. Side
And the
note, I
reason-
put earthworm casings in my flower beds yesterday. That it could
Love
have been
that.
you. You could have been my earthworm farmer.
I'm telling you, and at the time I found out from a friend of mine that like they were making like 6 figures being an earthworm dirt farmer.
Earthworm dirt farm. Oh, that I mean, it costs like $30 a bag.
Costco,
more.
$11.99. Thanks.
Still.
Not hashtag
Earthworm.
not sponsored.
Still,
Well,
I
mean, that could still be your retirement plan.
For real. It sounds like you might have a solid retirement plan there.
I love
All right,
it.
guys.
That
This
was
has
fun.
been fun. Do you have any?
Yeah.
You have a saved round? Or
Do you have any stories that you didn't tell that you want to tell?
I
know you
probably
got
told too
tons of them.
many. I probably told too many. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this and edit.
Yeah.
edit a bunch out.
Why we
we'll
got
take care of you.
cocktails.
We'll
to get
take care
those
of you in
good
editing.
cocktails.
All right. Thank you for listening to Cocktails and Sock Tales, the podcast where we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals.
Make sure you click subscribe.
Thanks again to Cyber Sensei, Frankie G, and apparently our biggest fan for joining us and talking about your experiences from the underground up through the cloud. Frankie, where can people find you? Can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I don't know how I posted in here for this, but I'll give it to you.
We'll link it in the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes where you can find all the other details discussed in the show. You can find Megan and I here on YouTube with Cocktails and Socktails every single Wednesday. Make sure to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a beat.
Subscribe.
Thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.
Make sure you click subscribe.